Thank you so much for those kind words. It's great to be here. Great to see everybody. Thanks for joining. Thanks for taking time out of your schedules to be here. And so I wanted to share, right? There's a million things to share when you're asked to share about Israel. There's a million things in a million hours you can take to share, but I chose one specific thing to share for the few minutes that we have together, related to what's going on, but in a different kind of way, coming from a different kind of perspective. Obviously, all of our eyes are on Israel these past many months. What's going on since October 7th, the war, the hostages, Gaza in the north, and the like. And obviously, our hearts and our minds and our prayers have been with the soldiers ever since October 7th. I mean, they're always with the soldiers, right? And where I pray every Shabbat, we say a prayer for the soldiers out loud with passion. Everyone stands up. We've been saying that forever, but of course, since October 7th, it's even more. But what I did want to talk about specifically is the IDF and its influence on Israeli society, because I think what a lot of people don't get, unless they live here in this country, and I certainly didn't get until I lived here in this country. My wife and I made Aliyah 20 years ago, was really the incredible and powerful and significant influence that the IDF has not only on our security and our protection, which is tremendous, and we thank them every single day for that, but on the society at large. And literally the way society runs and the way it looks and the nuances of the culture here. So I want to share a few things in the few minutes that we have. As Joe mentioned, I put out a book in 2017 called Becoming Israeli. Some of you might have a copy of it, maybe from the JNF conference many years ago. But in that book, one of the chapters, and this was the main motivation for me to even put out the book, was after a few years, even less than a few years of living here in Israel, I started to notice there's something so unique happening, right? There's something so unique. I thought I coined the term only in Israel, like these only in Israel moments. I realized shortly after that I did not coin the term, and people have been using that for a long time. But really all these only in Israel moments that happen, right? In all different kinds of realms and ways. And one of them really is directly connected to the IDF. And I hope that comes out in the next few minutes, right? As someone who makes Aliyah 20 years ago, I didn't grow up with a connection with Israel, with Zionism. Other people who make Aliyah, like my wife, were born and raised into like Zionism and connection to Israel. I wasn't. So when I came here, I'd come a few times before to visit, to connect spiritually, religiously. It had a huge, impact on my life. But it wasn't until I actually made Aliyah in 2004 that I really started to begin to understand Israeli society. And of course, that took many years. It's still happening. I'm still taking my time, understanding Israeli society. But there are certain things that happen here that don't happen elsewhere. They don't happen in America. They don't happen in Jewish communities in America. They don't happen in Jewish communities in Europe. They don't happen anywhere. Why? Because Israel is the only Jewish state. It's the only place that this could happen. When you get so many Jews living in one place and so many different kinds of Jews, there are going to be all kinds of only in Israel moments taking place. Okay? And again, as time went on, and as my kids started getting older, our four kids were all born here in Israel. And as they started getting older, especially into the teenage years, we started to realize, like, wait, this isn't how we did things when we were kids. We didn't like grow up the way our Israeli teenage kids are growing up. And really at the beginning for me, it was actually very, very difficult. Right? I had a big challenge with it. And it took me, again, some time. And then eventually I got around to it. And I realized, oh, this is how it happens here. And this is why. So kind of two categories I want to break it down into is like before Army service, how kids in this country, specifically kids, right, are influenced by the IDF even before they go into the IDF. All right. And then we'll look at very briefly during and afterwards. Okay. So kids here know, obviously, that when they get 18, they're going to the army, right? A lot of Israeli teens take a gap year of all kinds, secular Israeli teens, religious Israeli teens. Our oldest is just graduated high school last week, right? He's now on a trip. I'll give you an only Israel moment. He's now on a trip in Austria with two of his best friends, backpacking around the hills there. Like that's something I never would have done, when I was his age, growing up in America. I mean, I wouldn't have thought of it, and if I did, my parents wouldn't have let me. Right here, it's like the kids don't even ask permission; they just do because that's like what kids do here. But that also ties into his personal experience, ties into what I'm trying to get at, is that here, because parents know, Israeli-born parents, because they know that their kids, when they get to be 18, are going to be giving up the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years of their life, right, for the country, in service and protection of the country. They act differently as parents in all those years, especially those teenage years leading up to that moment when they are going to like literally give their kids to the IDF and know that their kids are going to have a completely different life, right? So they're going to be more lenient when it comes to certain rules or things that I thought were rules, right? They're going to be more flexible and more willing and more giving when it comes to like how late you stay out and when you go out and where you go out. Again, things, I grew up in the suburbs of New York, things I never did, never would have thought of doing. And if I did, my parents never would have let me. It's just normal. It's the norm here. Just a couple of quick examples. Literally, on the weekends, I mean, even our next oldest daughter, she just finished ninth grade. She's 15. Already when she's 14, she was like coming home. We realized because we didn't set boundaries, because like a lot of Israeli parents don't do it. And again, it might come off as like, but that's kind of weird. That's kind of like not okay. But it's ingrained into this bigger story, this bigger reality that's happening here. Our daughter would like walk through the door. I mean, we weren't up anymore. She told us the next morning, or she'd come in and say hello when into our bedroom at like 3:30 in the morning. Like, what's that? And then if we complained and we told them you can't do it, like, what are you talking about? All my friends' parents let them do that, right? Or they go out during the week. When I was in high school, you never went out on a school night. It wasn't even a thought, not even in 12th grade. Here it's like already in ninth grade, they want to go out, in the middle of the week till like 10 o'clock at night, 10:30. And again, when I started like saying this can't happen, this isn't the way it goes, like this is what happens in Israel. You guys don't know that because you didn't grow up here. And so again, that and many other different pieces, came together and helped me to realize, yes, Israeli parents in general, right, raise your kids differently here. They want to give them more freedom. They want to give them more independence. They want to give them more fun because they know when they get 18, they're giving all that up in a way that, with all due love and respect, I didn't do as an American Jew. And if my kids were growing up in America, they wouldn't be doing. They'd be going to college and having even more freedom, right? And it's such an interesting part of this culture and the society here, right? Is that parents know already years ahead, even at younger ages than teenage years. Right? I'll give you a few other examples. When our kid first went into youth movements here, right, in America called youth group. I did USY when I was a kid. Right, our kids have done B'nai Akiva, like the kind of like national religious youth movement here. When we dropped off our oldest kid the first time, at the first activity when he was in like second grade, I looked around for like the supervisor, the head of the branch, the head of the youth group branch. I couldn't find anyone. Everyone looked like they were like 16, 17, and 18 years old. Why? Because they were the ones leading the entire thing. The oldest person there was 18 years old. 18 years old, running the whole thing as part of her national service. There wasn't like an adult to be found. Even when they went on like all day, like Tiolim, trips around the country, that was it. 18-year-old was the oldest. Even when they went camping for 3 days in a row, wherever in the country, that was it. The 16, 17, and 18-year-olds were running the whole show, right? Why? Because Israeli society supports that. They want that. They want that to be part of these kids' experience because they're going to use all of that. Guess what? When they go to the army, they're already going to be used to being given leadership roles and responsibility, right? Looking after others and tackling problems. Were there problems with our kids throughout the years in the youth movement? Yes. The first hike our daughter went on, she got lost and her counselors didn't even know where she was for hours. Did I like that? No. But it's like part of the experience. It's like they learn by failing and falling and falling and failing, and they become better and better at what they do. So when they get to the IDF, they've already had experience in doing the things that the IDF needs them to do to protect this country, right? So that's some of the things. You see this in the schools, right? If you walk into an Israeli school as an American, you're going to be shocked. You're like, where's the order? Where's the control? Where's anything on some level, right? And it's because the teachers treat the students in a very different way than I remember being treated when I was a kid growing up through the educational system there. And again, not to say that the Israeli educational system is all perfect, right? But it's based on this idea that kids should be given a responsibility. They should be given leadership way before their time, so to speak, right? Because of the reality that we're living in here in Israel, right? So moving on, right? Of course, during their army service, going to have a tremendous impact on their lives, but not only on their lives, on the rest of their lives after the army service. And that's really when the IDF has such a tremendous impact on Israeli society, right? Just go through a quick list, I'm not going to go into the details because of time. But when we think about these Israeli kids, they're kids. I remember the first time I fundraised for Israeli soldiers during the wars, the end of 2008, right? It was the first war against Hamas after Israel left the Gaza Strip. And I fundraised thousands of dollars and bought tons of pizza. And I went down to the Gaza Strip and I found a random base in the middle of nowhere. And I handed out all these pizzas. And I came across all these tanks. And all the guys coming out in tanks were like kids, 18-year-old kids. I was handing pizza boxes to, and they just got out of Gaza, right? And so like these kids, instead of, sleeping late and going to parties all night, like, let's be honest, I did and my friends did in college, right? They're giving over their lives to the IDF, to the country. And the things, the list that I want to go through really quickly, they're learning values like being a Rosh Gadol. Being a Rosh Gadol in Hebrew means taking initiative. Don't wait around for someone else to do it. Don't even wait around for someone to tell you to do it. Just go up and do it. When I worked at MUS, at Alexander Muss High School in Israel, right? We used to have our teacher meetings, and most of us were Americans, and they had a certain style to it, more American style. And then we had the Madjuchim meetings, the counselors, those who live with the students, and that had a whole different feel. The Madjuchim, the counselors, they were fresh out of the army, right? And they literally treated every meeting as like an army meeting. Like, okay, what do we have to do? Make a list. 1, 2, 3. Who's doing what? Get to work. Everyone's like, like questioning everything and everybody else. And there's like a whole, the Americans are just like, okay, sitting quietly and orderly and just like being told what to do. Yeah, okay, we'll go do it. There's something about, right, Israelis and Israeli society, and it really comes from the army. This idea of being a Rosh Gadol, they're being taught already before the army, especially in the army, and they take it with them after the army, of taking initiative. Don't wait around. I remember years ago, I was with a group, we're going to Masada. So we slept at a nearby hostel, and we had to wake up really early so we can get to the top of Masada for the sunrise. And the gate, like this huge, massive gate, that was like at the parking lot at the hostel that we're staying, it wasn't opening. It wasn't something that you can just pull open. It was like this massive electronic gate, and it wasn't opening. I was calling people, nobody was answering. I'm like, oh my God, we're gonna miss Masada, we're gonna miss the sunrise, what's going on? Meanwhile, I'm sitting in the bus complaining, right? And meanwhile, I didn't realize that my madrich, this guy who just came out of some like elite unit in the army, got off the bus and started tinkering with the wires of the gate and opened the thing up himself. And like hit me. This guy's like still in the army on some level. He's looking at a gate, like that will open the way for the bus to get to Masada on time, the same way he was looking at things in the army, because it's with him now, and it will be with him for the rest of his life. Right? A couple other things just really quickly. Chutzpah, right? We know it's a Jewish value, but it really comes to life in the Jewish state. Not being afraid to question authority. In a lot of countries like America, it's like not okay. It's not respectful. You're being rude. In Israel, it's like, obviously, I think probably most of you guys know that. It's like if you don't question, like, who are you? They don't even want you around. If you're not questioning authority, if you're not questioning, coming up with different ways of approaching a problem. Right? So there's that Rosh Gadol, that's taking initiative, being chutzpahdik in the best way possible, working together as a team, tzevet, right? My nieces and nephews are in the army, right? And in reserve duty, they're in and out of Gaza these past, 8-9 months. And what are they called? They're going into Gaza as a tzevet, right? As a tzevet, which means staff. Right? They're like a group, they're working together, they rely on one another, right? They're there with each other until the end. That is going to impact the rest of their life, right? In the army, it's the 7, and then when they go to work for a company or a coffee bar, they're working together. They got each other's back. I remember, so many great memories of JNF-USA. The American teachers, we'd sit down at the dinner table at some hostel that we're staying at, and everyone came with their own tray and their own drink and their own dessert, and we ate together. The Israelis, they brought their tray of food, but they brought salads for everybody. They brought desserts for everybody. It's like they were thinking way beyond themselves, right? And it's an amazing thing to see. It's an amazing thing to be around these past 20 years. And to see my kids growing up in this is like the biggest gift ever. I'll just end with this. One of the greatest things you can imagine, right, that young Israelis get by serving in the army and being prepped for the army is a love for this country. Right? Love for this country. And since October 7th, we've seen that in a whole nother way. But Jews inside Israel, Jews outside of Israel, it's a whole new world for the Jewish people. Right? Of course, intensity and tragedy and sadness, but also this is a time, and we can't forget this. We are living in historical times of inspiration and dedication, right? And Mesirat Nefesh, as we call it in Hebrew, giving of oneself. The love for the country that comes out of the army experience is so tremendous. And I see that already in my kids. My son, our oldest, who just graduated high school, he's been working out, I'm not even kidding, for the last 4 years. He became buff, for the last 4 years. Why? Because he wants to like walk around on the beach and show his muscles? No, because he wants to get into an elite unit in the army. Really? Right? Why does he want to get into an elite unit in the army? Because he wants to protect his people. He said it himself. 17 years old, 16, 15, he's talking like that. I was talking about like such different things at his age, right? He loves this place. Our kids love this country. It's unbelievable to see. It's inspiring. And really, all this can be tied back to the IDF, which is not only protecting our people, protecting our country, it's shaping our country. It's shaping the future of the Jewish people, right? And the soldiers, when they leave, right, they take all of this with them into civilian life, and therefore civilian life in Israel is affected and impacted and shaped as well, and it continues to be. Whether someone owns a falafel shop or drives a taxi or is the CEO of a startup, they're all bringing that same thing. And I'll end with this. Okay, I'll end with this. Again, going back to Musk's great memories. This is going back 6 or 7 years ago. I randomly read an article about this IDF mission I never knew happened. I think it was in the 60s, where we had ordered certain ships from France, and then because of some politics that happened, they weren't delivering them to Israel. And it was a really big deal because we really needed it. It was before America took the place of France. And there was this whole crazy mission of Israeli soldiers going in and basically taking the ships by themselves. It was a crazy. I was like, wow, I never heard of this story. I'm not even kidding. I'm not kidding. This is an only an Israel moment, and with this will end. I'm on the bus the next week with a group of students from JNF-USA. We're going somewhere, and then one of the bus drivers who I know for years. And I didn't bring up this story. I didn't bring up this article I read. He, on his own, for the first time, I knew him for years, brought up somehow in the conversation that he was part of this tremendous mission that took place in the 1960s, where Israeli soldiers went into the ports of France undercover, right, and took ships that were ours that they weren't giving to us. And I'm like, what? Like, I just read about that. Like, with all due love and respect, like you're driving a bus right now, and you are a national hero. You did something tremendous that goes down in the history books. He's like, yeah, that's what we do here. Whether you're, again, a falafel store owner, a bus driver, a taxi driver, or a CEO of a startup, right? All kinds of Israelis are taking this inspiration and this shaping with them into their lives, and we all benefit from it tremendously. Thank you so much for inviting me. Great to be here, and blessings to everyone from Israel.